Welcome to the first in a special trilogy of webinars called FutureVigilance. This series is brought to you by Biologit and Truliant Consulting, all on the Truliant Talks platform. My name is Indy Alawalia, and I'm here to welcome you to this webinar on behalf of Truliant Talks. This first webinar is called FutureVigilance, Process and Change Management. But before I introduce the format and the guest for today, here is a quick disclaimer. The opinions expressed in this webinar are solely those of the individual guest and do not necessarily reflect the official views of Truliant Consulting, Biologit, or even their own companies. We're all about fostering insightful conversations here at Truliant Talks, and we want you to know that any product, vendor, or service mentioned does not imply an endorsement. If you're seeking professional advice for specific situations, we encourage you to go to our experts. Please remember, this webinar's content is meant for informational and educational purposes only. Now, today we have a fantastic group of panelists who are eager to answer your questions and ensure you take away the maximum value from this session. So please write in the comments if there are any questions. If you feel shy about asking any questions on the comment section, then please just DM me directly on LinkedIn and I can get those questions over to the panelists. Now, let me introduce this format. So firstly, we have Emma, who will be presenting a small presentation on change management. We're then going to have a panel session, which will be moderated by Nicole. Rich, Santosh, and Emma will be on the panel to answer questions. And then at the end, I'll pop up to select a few questions from you guys in the comments section. Now, with all that done and the introductions done, I now bring to the stage Emma.
Hi, Indy, thank you. So as Indy said, I'm going to give just a brief overview of process design and change management and what it means specifically for us in pharmacovigilance. So if you don't mind loading up the slides, Indy, that's great. The first thing I want to do is just welcome you all. So welcome to the webinar. And as Indy said, we'll be taking questions throughout, so do please pop them into the chat. So the first thing I want to do is just talk to you all about process design. Here is the very technical definition that you'll see if you look up what process design is. It's for us to look at objective setting, look at the sequence and flow of activities and tasks that we do, look at the resources that we need to perform a process, look at how we can get efficiency and optimization when we are designing a process, look at quality control measures that we might need to implement, look at how we can be flexible and have adaptability within our process, and then also how we document and communicate where we need to throughout the process that we're writing. So that's the official terminology of what process design is. What I want to do is really look at what the official definition means for pharmacovigilance. So in pharmacovigilance, we have many processes, and we look at them being more efficient every single day. We're getting higher case volumes, we're getting budget constraints, and not able to increase our team to manage these activities. If you can move on to the next slide, Indy, that's great. So when we are designing or redesigning a business process, with all these budget constraints, our increasing volumes, our increasing workload, what we're really trying to do is ensure that we keep our compliance as our top priority, but we're driving to become much faster at each activity. And we're looking to become more streamlined and efficient, using resources with the right level of skill to perform that task. Or we're at these days looking at what technology can support that process. So where can we get efficiency gains from a technology aspect, stepping in to cover some of the tasks that we used to do ourselves. So with process design, it's usually conducted via a process mapping workshop where we deliver a process flow at the end, where we've mapped out all the tasks, who's going to do them, whether it's system taking over that task, whether it's a analyst taking over the task, whether it's somebody that needs a scientific background, so we've got a scientific person taking over the task, or a medical reviewer, for instance. Once we've designed that process, we then use that to write our SOPs and our job aids, and so that we've got everything documented and we become compliant. So that's process design. But when we are designing a process and when we are looking at bringing in new technology or implementing new technology, on top of that, we need change management. And so again, let's just have a look at the official definition of what change management is. So what you get if you look up change management is it's a systematic approach to proposing, evaluating, approving, and implementing and reviewing changes. So it's ensuring that we've got continual improvement, and it's done in a timely and effective manner, and we deliver what we say we're going to deliver on time, to budget, and with a high degree of assurance that we've managed our way through the change and there's no consequences. That's officially what it means, but let's look practically what it means in pharmacovigilance. So I think the most important thing with change management is having a great change management plan up front. It can be the difference between success and failure of a project. And we'll have a look at some statistics in a minute of what good change management actually does to the success rate of a project. But change management can include a variety of activities, and I believe all of these should be done together to give you that comprehensive change management plan. So it's looking at what communications are needed, to which stakeholders, and which media they're likely to read the communication or absorb that communication and the information in that communication. It's looking at change agents that can be around in the office, that are mingling with the stakeholders, that are really promoting the change that's coming along, promoting the benefits that the change has to offer. It's looking at getting the right stakeholder buy-in right from the beginning and making sure everyone's involved and understands the change along the way. We can do things like user forums to get people together to talk and collaborate around the change and how it's going to benefit the team. We're looking at user acceptance testing, and I know this is an important part of a technology project, but it can also be used as an effective change management tool. So I think if you leave enough time from your user acceptance testing to be able to correct any findings that are there, it will help users adopt the technology that's coming in. Quite often in projects, we do user acceptance testing, but there's not enough time. It's done too close to go live and we don't have enough time to fix or correct the findings. So making sure that we do that at the appropriate time and allow ourselves time to correct what's found. Also training, so looking at different medias for our training as well, not just a slide deck that's pushed out to the team. So looking at hands-on exercises, looking at written guidance documents, looking at people actually getting their hands dirty in the system and allowing enough time for training and questions and thoughts to come out. And then I think change management also extends post-go live. So a good hypercare system in place with the right stakeholders, again, being able to answer the questions in a timely manner, helping to find solutions and answers, all make for a very, very good change management plan and change management system. And my great panelists today are going to talk much more about real life scenarios and the types of tools and things they've used to create great change management plans. So that being said, if we move on just to look at some statistics around change management. So I think one of the statistics that I found really interesting, that organizations that have an active and engaged sponsor for their projects see a 40% increase in success rates. So we want to make sure when we're doing an implementation project that the sponsor of the project is really there. They are promoting why we're doing this change, interacting with the key stakeholders, and on a regular basis, not just introducing the project and then disappearing behind the scenes. So at multiple points throughout the project, including that sponsor and getting them involved in any communications that we need to deliver, getting them involved hands-on as well, so that they understand and can help engage when they're looking at the company and talking to people when they're walking the streets of the office. Another fact that I found really interesting was around the statistics around the adoption from highly digital mature companies. So people that have a high digital maturity have a significantly higher success rate when they're implementing their change initiatives. So it suggests that people are used to change, have used technology to help support change management, and they're really getting results in these types of organizations. Another fact that I found really interesting, and this is probably my favorite one, I think, was that there was a study done that highlighted that 40% of organizations identified change fatigue as the most significant barrier to successful change initiatives. So as we all know, companies undertake many projects at the same time. They're constantly being bombarded with information about the different projects that are happening, and they kind of build up this resilience to change. So making sure that your project has an effective change management plan with different medias, different ways of engaging people is probably the best way to go if you don't want people to get that change fatigue and build up a barrier towards your project. And then the last statistic I just wanted to share with you before we jump into our panel discussion was around projects that have effective change management plans in place and are delivering good change management. So if you've got a really great change management practice, your project is 7 times more likely to meet its objectives than those with poor practices. So specifically, 88% of those projects with excellent change management met or exceeded their objectives, compared to only 13% of projects with poor change management actually met their end goals and met their objectives. So I think those statistics really show us why change management is important and why we should think about it when we're undertaking projects. But now I'm going to hand over to our panelists who are going to talk about change management in real life. So I'd like to introduce Nicole Baker. She is going to chair our panel discussion, and she is the CEO of Biologit and has many, many years in the industry. So lots and lots of detail to bring into this discussion today. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you. And I would like Santosh and Rich to introduce themselves as well.
Maybe I start. Hi everyone, I'm Santosh Sherupalli. I work with Novartis as a process governance and training excellence lead. I've been associated with this company for around 13 years now. I'm based in Hyderabad. Nice to be participating in this panel discussion on a very interesting topic of process and change management, which I'm also contributing in my capacity now as a process governance and training excellence lead here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sound okay, Emma?
Yes.
All right. So great to be here. I'm very much looking forward to the conversation today. I'm Rich Wolf. I am 20 plus years in safety over the years. Interesting, I think, fact. I started actually as a change management consultant at Accenture 25 years ago. Had an early view that change management was the purple dinosaur, the fluffy stuff, and it is often cut from budgets when pressure comes. And I can tell you from my 20 years that you should not allow that to happen. So hopefully over the next 45 minutes or so, we can help folks understand why change management is as important as it is.
Thank you. Thanks, Rich and Santosh. And I think, you can bring a lot of experience and real life cases here for the audience. And I think this is what is interesting about it, and kind of share experiences. So could you share a specific instance where the adoption of new technology led to significant positive outcomes for an organization? And what do you think are the factors that contribute to success? I will start with you, Santosh. No, sorry, Rich.
Sure, absolutely. The last company I was with, we we started with what seems a fairly standard initiative, which is a transition from ClinTrace to Argus. And I'll talk about that one in a bit of detail, but I think largely because of the use of change management, that, and then upgrade to E2BR2, and then upgrade to Argus J, even during the pandemic, were largely successful because of that change management. The first step is helping folks understand, why do you need to change? What is the change you need to make? Why do you need to make that change? And I think change management starts there with that central topic being really well aligned across the stakeholder sets at the executive level. Usually requires significant investment, and so that's going to get challenged hard. But as you go through that exercise, I think engaging the levels in the organization that are going to be impacted is what you use to drive success, and that's hard. It's hard to engage folks who are often threatened by new technology. They're worried their jobs are going away. They're worried their jobs are just going to get harder because it's new technology and it's going to be different. And so a comprehensive change management plan, absolutely, but the engagement of the leadership across the organization is what makes that project successful in the end. And I think Santosh is going to talk a bit about the change that we're looking at right now. We know we're at a revolutionary moment here in PV. The advancing technology is driving a lot of that. But we have a lot of history in safety. Some on the call, I'm sure, will know, E2BR2, Volume 9, Volume 9A, the migration of resource from nearshore to far. These are all massive changes that the industry and individuals will have gone through, and they should have taught us well that this change management aspect is crucial. More recently, GVP. And now we're in this moment of the advancing technologies, call it AI, ML. But I think it's a moment, and I think it's a moment for us to really be focused on this change management aspect. And now Santosh talked about the sexy stuff, I think.
Before I go to Santosh, I just want to ask you one question. So in terms of size, I always wonder who should be involved in change management. So you mentioned that senior management, but what is, like, from your experience, like the best level of the starting point of starting a change? So should that be from, what do you see? Should that be from people in operations that doing the daily job that come to their managers and say, this is not working out, can we change? Should it come now? I hear a lot that is coming from the CEO saying, we have pressure, we need to implement AI. What do you think? Because it depends on the size of the change as well. So a big change to a company, who do you think should be kind of the little seeds and to make it? Because if you think about it, like, you're planting little seeds that will then grow and make the whole change, but where do you think it usually comes from? Is it from a budget that you don't have enough, let's think about money, we need to decrease from X millions to X, half of it? Where do you think that starts?
Ideally, it's possible to start from all of them, and the job, I think, of the leaders in safety and operations especially is to listen, make sure you're getting that information. That's the hardest thing to get as a leader in an organization, and then it's your job to curate that and to understand where is there something that we need to take hold of, and ideally harness the source of it, lift them up, and help you sort of carry the message. I think the other part of the question, Nicole, is sometimes it comes from different places. I think the pressure right now is coming from the C-suite, and this is going to drive change across PV. There are also likely individuals at the operator level all across the organizations who will be savvy with the tech, who will see the opportunities, and will also be driving toward it. And I think as a leader, if you're able to connect those 2 points, build a vision, you're more likely to carry an organization forward to achieve that vision.
Thanks, Rich. So, Santosh, could you elaborate as well on your experience and with more recent changes of, like, innovation that is bringing positive changes?
Yes. So maybe I can talk about a past instance, because that is something that got implemented already, right? Where we had manual tracking of all the vigilance agreement in the organization, but using the technology, we moved into platform basically to track the vigilance agreements, to store them all at a place, the contacts and the commitments, basically what are the commitments and how do we track them, so that that's a single source of truth, and which is also preparing your organization to be audit and inspection ready. So we use the technology there to really have a very positive impact on in the organization. We are very quick in responding during the inspection and audit, that being a single source of truth, and people need not get dependent on multiple associates. You have everything at one place, basically. And one of the important factors that contributed was a very strong project management. And I just wanted to link to today's topic is the change management, right? One of the strongest pillar there, right from the start, from the sponsor, right? Such projects can only work well when the vision is very clearly set and the message is actually coming top down to the end user. Why are we doing it? It's not just using a technology, but what are the benefits that you get, right? What is our vision by using this technology and implementing such kind of project, and having a positive communication across through the project. And some of the important change management elements is also to include the end user in the whole process, right? Start discussing with them the different impact that will be on the multiple sub-functions or cross-functions that you have because of this particular project, and what procedures and what processes it touches, right? You might have multiple procedures that needs to be updated, which might take a very long time. So you really need to start upfront, bringing everything in one place, have a proper procedural management plan, and ensuring everyone are taking part of it, so that you have a successful implementation. Because in such technical projects, even a slight delay because you are not on time implementing it, or you're not on time not training and ensuring it goes live, it will have a much bigger impact on the costs, right? Because you work with vendors and IT, business, multiple resources. So it's important that you have a very strong change management plan.
So if you're thinking about time and thinking about the time that it takes for the change for change, for adoption of new technology, what would you say for companies that are thinking about it, that are on that kind of initial stages of, let me think about how long it takes to do an implementation? And I know it depends. The answer is it depends. But what would be your, when you're thinking about a project, do you have a number in your mind that how long is that going to take for training and implementation and all the and to follow the whole process and investigation and getting together? And as well, with time comes who is the right group of people to start that process, because we could start big, everybody involved, we could start small with only a few stakeholders, and companies will do that in different ways. But from your experience, what do you think it is? I know that one size, I heard that last week, one size fits no one, wasn't it, that we heard in the Y Summit last week? So it's like one size fits no one. But what would you think is like the sweet spot of kind of getting it right?
Yes, you're right. That it all depends upon the size of the change, right? And what is the impact of the change as well, right? There could be some changes which are small, some changes which are huge. You do a transformation project, then it takes a long time, basically, because you have multiple, maybe internally within PV, you have multiple sub-functions, different areas where you need to vet the impact. And there could also be cross-functions. PV is not just in PV, right? It pans across other development areas like regulatory, clinical, etc. So it depends. Somewhere around 3 to 5 months is something for a medium to big size project, where I say you need to upfront start before the go live, the whole, especially the process and the procedural change management, to comfortably complete all the impact assessment, ensure the procedures are updated, and you have a proper training and go live, basically, right? And who are the main stakeholders? These are our key SMEs. You start with them, not with the whole end users, rather the key SMEs from each of this end user community. However, you need to complement it with this with the end user socialization sessions. It's not just the SMEs. SMEs are the voice of these groups, but you need to conduct regular end user socializations where you go and use forums, sit with them to understand this is what has been developed. Maybe you're working, suppose, on an agile methodology, you develop some pocket of the project, you go sit with them, understand this is what has been developed and this is the benefits that you get from it. Are you fine? And do you have a feedback? So that's how you have constructively also involve your end users in, ensuring that their feedback is taken in making this change effective. So you start with the SMEs, but you also ensure that the end users are brought in during the whole process. Otherwise, they'll be left out and you have resistance at the end of the day.
Yeah, Rich, do you
Yeah,
have?
Nicole, I think I would add a little bit, Santosh, and I think I've definitely evolved over the years. But one of the things that I found is there's a way to creatively engage the right people early on. I'm a huge advocate for very good project management, ideally PV knowledgeable project management. But then if you engage the right folks early and you let them know where we're trying to get to, you can be creative. You can engage those groups into the planning, the deployment planning, the user acceptance, as Emma said earlier. These are change management elements that allow you to compress that schedule a little bit more. I think what you should avoid doing is taking change management out, because it happens and it's really a mistake. Communication, training, the organizational impacts, I think, especially with this moment we're in right now, are more significant than some of the past changes we've talked about. So I don't think we can give you a hard number, Nicole, but I think there are ways to creatively compress the schedule if you do it carefully.
Okay, yeah, I like the compress the schedule, because the schedule could be, as short or as long, depending on the experience as well of the people that are involved in the transformation, I suppose. Because if you have a group that has done it before, they might have more experience in change management and implementing technology. And using one of the comments that Emma said, that if companies have already developed or implemented technology or the digital savvy, they might have a smoother process than companies that are kind of starting from a more with not so much experience in doing change management at that point. What do you think is the primary challenges and risks when implementing new technologies? Because a lot of companies now, they have, there's all the vendors out there trying to sell new technology and saying, buy my new technology, this is brilliant, it's going to do A, B, C, D and everything, and you can, implement it and get it working the first day. What do you think are the risks, and how would you work with, in terms of looking at those risks and trying to mitigate them? Especially with the unknown of AI, for example, but we can use other examples as well, but we can use AI as one example where there might be some risks in implementing new technology.
You want to try it, Santosh, or shall I?
No, I can. So some of the primary challenges that I see is not involving the end users, basically, right? That is one of the key challenge that I see when you implement the new technology in this process, basically. So you try to involve very few SMEs who are knowledgeable in this particular area of artificial intelligence, etc., for that particular process, and you try to develop it. And at the end of the day, when you have to have the end users implement it, they really do not understand how the technology will help them, or how is it going to, what is the value that you add for their work, basically. And how you need to address is basically to involve them in the whole journey. It's not just the change management should just not be like a side note or not a reactive. Rather, when you have such technology project, right from when you conceive it, right, you have a planning phase, basically. You should partner with them and they should decide how the process should work with the technology, right? Or how the technology will improve the process. So you need to partner with them. You need to ensure that they are the ones who would review what are the technologies around. They participate in maybe in the vendor selection, whoever are the vendors providing these technologies. They see what are the different pros and cons of this, and they also try to hear from other companies how the experience is, and they decide, of course, there'll be a robust decision making with the leadership, but they being the partner in this will really help the project or the technology project be successful at the end of the day. That's how I see. That's the main risk, that you involve few people and you have resistance at the end of the day.
I don't disagree with you, Santosh, but I think I'm going to focus a little more on, I think, the change that people are facing right now, which is a little bit unique, I think, because the technologies are changing very rapidly right now. And my view is that it's a structural question that the industry, the folks in this area face right now, which is very complex. And for that reason, the change management risk right now is not having a management group with appropriate attention span and willingness to commit to a strategic intention. So that means long-term, typically high cost, and typically very difficult to reverse. This is a strategic choice, a strategic moment for companies right now. And we'll talk, I think, in a future session about the economics of the business case for this. Those are worth spending more time, I think, than some of the changes we've all been through before. We need to upgrade because of the new regulation, because of E2B, because of, right, this one's a little bit different. Do we need to change? The pressure from the C-suite is not going away. Who is going to make that? Who's going to drive the innovation here? Will it be those vendors that we know who run safety systems? Will it be individual pharma companies who are being driven by C-suite to implement this stuff? Will it be the service providers who provide those services and potentially provide arm's length for compliance with the EU AI Act and things like that? And so I think I don't disagree at all, Santosh, that engagement of the end users will be critical. But in this moment right now, I think it's the senior leadership and not only commitment to do change management right, but commitment to spend the time necessary to make the right choice.
And Nicole, I just wanted to jump in and add a couple of points, because it really provoked me to think of a couple of things. So I think there's 2 points I wanted to make. And one was around if you've got a change management plan and you're rolling everything out, one of the biggest risks is just assuming that you've done your job. I think doing a pulse check, right, to make sure that your communication has reached the right people, that they've read something, they've understood something. So a survey at strategic points along the journey to just check in with the end users and test the temperature, because you might need to adapt, you might need to pivot, you might need to do something else. I've seen so many companies think, okay, I've got my change management plan. I've done everything that they say that you should do in this perfect change management world. I've done my communication. I've got my hypercare plan at XYZ. But they haven't actually ever checked the pulse of the company and seen if anything is working. So I think that's a huge risk, is just assuming that it's done and dusted because I've done everything I had in my original plan.
So that pulse that you're mentioning, what would you use to do that? What would be because there's no best and worst in this, and different companies are different as well. But how would you do that? And how could you, let's say, pivot in the middle of an implementation or change management that has gone so far that you don't want to kind of start walking backwards?
Yeah. So I'll answer, and then I'll give it to Rich and Santosh as well to answer. So I would do it in multiple forums, the pulse check, because as I mentioned early on, and as I think one of the comments that we'll look into later was around change fatigue. So if I send a survey out, for instance, it could be a tool to do a pulse check, very quick, multi-choice, just 3 questions, say, just to take a really quick temperature. But every other project might have done that as well. And I might see this survey come through and think, I'm not filling that one in. I've just filled in one from the other day. That change fatigue setting in. So it's about having a coffee break and just mingling in the right area in the office and just asking a couple of questions of people when you bump into them.
How do we do that in a
remote world? Well, yeah, I think we've got that. We do that quite well at Truliant, because we have Indy, the host of the show. He will phone people and just have a 5-minute chat on Teams. He'll see someone's green, they're not in a meeting, just ring someone and just test the temperature. Like, oh, talk to me about what you're up to today. How are things going? Like, what are you working on? Do you need any help with anything? What about our meeting on Friday? Did you get the point of that? Like, I think that's a great way, is just, again, it's the same as a coffee break conversation. You see someone's available, you just have a little check on them. Or you have specific sessions like user forums, and in those user forums, you let everyone air their issues and problems, but you have a couple of questions tailored around just their understanding and how far have you come along on the journey so far. But I think I've talked enough, so I want Rich and Santosh to just also say what they've seen as well.
Well, I'm interested in Santosh. What are you guys doing up there? Because I more or less follow Emma's suggestion. I'm very deliberate about it. The check-in. I acknowledge very well. Feedback is one of the most difficult things for leaders to get, and so you really have to work hard to overcome that somehow and make people feel like you actually want to hear. You may not be able to act immediately and decisively on it, but you really have to work to get that feedback. But what do you guys do, Santosh?
Yeah. Surveys are definitely one of the good way, as Emma pointed out. The other way is also the change champions, right? We actually, some of these projects where have change champions who can really be the voice of the end user, right? They might not be comfortable directly giving it to LT, but this is the middle management whom we employ. These are the leaders, the change leaders, basically giving the message top down and from down to the top, right? We use the change management. We have the change management, the change champions, the change agents or the change champions. Basically, we built a community basically, and they act as a middle management or the leaders between the end users and the leaders to tell us the pulse, right? We have, at least in the projects that I work, we have a bi-weekly connect where we encourage the change champions to really talk to the people based on the socialization that we have done. What is the true feedback? Are they happy, or are there some sentiments or something that they are not comfortable to share directly with the LT? That is what they bring to us, and it's a change lead community who then makes a decision on how to approach the LT and how can we really mitigate the concerns that the end users have raised. So we generally use the change champion community to ensure that we get this feedback and the pulse check from the end users.
Yeah, that's interesting, Santosh. We have that as well. So within when we implement the technology, it's lots of different levels of people that we talk to, but there's always the champion, which is the person on the ground working with the team, and that person might be the most vocal person and happy to come and talk to us. But there might be a whole team that are not so vocal, but they're talking to that champion and letting them know what is working well, what is not, and they are not shy to say, this is, especially with AI, because I think with AI, sometimes people don't want to come to us and say your AI is wrong, or the AI made a mistake. It's like it's so it's an interesting kind of conversation that you can have with that person who is the one listening to the rest of to everybody else working on the implementation, and that they can bring that feedback. And I think I couldn't agree more with all of the comments that an open the communication and listening. It's very important. We need to listen, and if we don't listen, then we're not gonna, especially for the vendors, if we don't listen, we're not gonna make the right product, because nobody's gonna want to use it, right? I'm going to ask another question, that How do you effectively manage? So when we go from change management, how do we look at adoption, and how do we look at how companies adopting new technologies, and what are the role of change management when we are doing that whole change of adoption? Because adoption might take a while, because you might have, unless it's a safety database, for example, which you need to use on a day-to-day basis, but you might have technology in your company that you've never ever used.
That's a tricky one. That's not a formula, I think, that is in those change management details that Emma shared earlier. I'll give you an experience that I have that I think was helpful. Maybe you remember back when bots were the thing, and we were going to use bots to automate all the stuff across case management. We weren't sure. We weren't sure how that was going to go, how validation was going to go, how the regulators were going to like that. And so we went quite deliberately and said, we need use cases, and we encouraged people from grassroots to say, make my life easier by giving me a bot to do that. We weren't so focused on the business case because it was relatively low investment, but it was a very high opportunity to see, can this stuff do what we think it can do? And if so, then we can embark on a bigger, broader change, leveraging the bots. Great experience, great exercise, learned a lot, found out we could use this stuff in the GXP environment, but you had to have a certain scale in order to make the business case work out. So having had that experience with a few folks who raised their hand, they wanted to make their life easier, being able to do something with it, and then also being able to very decisively say, thank you, we've learned a lot, you've learned a lot, we're not going to go in that direction, here's why. I think was a very good experience organizationally for the individuals involved. And it's the kind of thing I think, as you talk about AI and some of the challenges ahead for us, is maybe that's a bit of a recipe that can work.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. Santosh, would you have an additional points to that?
No, I completely agree to what Ruth said. And just to add, right, so especially with this new technology, it's all about inculcating the new mindset, the behaviors and the ways of working, basically. Otherwise, the changes will be implemented at the end of the day, but you don't get the actual written which you anticipated. So it's all about as part of the change management plan, to really inculcate in the minds of the end users the different ways of working with the technology and the behaviors, basically, and how that could really help them in their day-to-day work, and how can they really alleviate from the boring, monotonous work and really concentrate on the the strategic work that can really add value at the end of the day to the PV, basically.
And is there on that type of work of implementation and adoption, do you have any written strategies? Like, is there any kind of book or kind of written advice that you can find anywhere, or do you think it all comes from experience in terms of best practices? Obviously, they are the best practices and strategies that you can follow, and it's your processes and things like that. But is there anything that you think is the kind of special sauce to make it work?
I'll give you my view, because I've been thinking about this a bit lately, Nicole. And one of the things that I've come to realize, and I think others have as well, is this is a revolutionary moment for us. And because of that, there's a lot of unknown and how things are going to shake out. I mentioned earlier, structurally across pharma services, vendors, there is that uncertainty. Some people will decide not to do anything because it's too uncertain. Others will say their risk tolerance allows them to experiment with this approach or that one. I think it's really important at this moment to be continually engaged with community, to understand how others are doing, what they're learning. And the other point I'll highlight is that this is not our first rodeo. We've been through all the jobs are going to India. How's that going to happen? A certain large pharma took that first step. There were bumps. Some people took the work to India, brought it back because of concerns. These are big revolutionary moments we've gone through over the last 20 years that should help us understand how we take this, zero tolerance for error, 100% compliance part of the business, and find a way to move it forward as it's expected to move forward from that C-suite. So it's not the first time we're doing it, but I don't think there's a methodology that I have that I would point to. Not sure about you, Santosh.
No, there is no, there is not a book where we can read such strategies. It's all about experience. That's how I see it from my career, right? But maybe I can outline some of the best practices that we can use in the change management, especially in such a technology project. Is start with preparing for the change, right? You need to understand what are the change objectives and really have a proper stakeholder map, right? What are all your stakeholders? What is their current level of understanding? And where do you want to really take them in this whole process? And accordingly, you design the communication for each of these particular stakeholders. And you need to also, as part of managing the change, you really need to also understand upfront what is the impact that it has, both on business, both on IT, what is the impact that you have, and you accordingly have an impact assessment and a plan for it, basically, right? And the other strategy to use is the end user socialization sessions, as I was talking. It's not just at the end you have a training, you really give a hands-on and you throw it to them, it won't work. You really early on, from the initial stages of such projects, you really need to have the end user socialization, get the vision from the sponsor to them, what it brings as a value to them, how can we really partner in this whole journey. This is all can happen during these forums, basically. And the other important aspect is the training and coaching that is in any implementation, basically, right? And to use multiple type of tech bite sessions wherein you can really bring people into the room and give them the use cases and try them, rather than the routine training slides or something. Create videos basically explaining how the system works and give them the hands-on experience, give them the use cases, and then implement that particular project, right? And it's also important after implementing, you measure the post implementation, how it works after the hypercare.
That was going to be my question, but I said we probably need a new webinar altogether to talk about that, because we're talking a lot about the nice stuff, like what comes before and then the implementation, but then how long is hypercare? How long is the time afterwards, after it has been successfully implemented? How do we look after the people and the project and the technology that has been evolved? So I think it will be a very interesting conversation for us as well. As you were speaking, I was like, I want to go on the post, but I think we're gonna have to stop here, and I will hand to, I think, Indy now.
Yes.
Or I'm not sure.
No, I've forced myself back into this conversation right now. So we've had a few comments come in from guys on LinkedIn. So I just want to get through some of these because I think some of them are very interesting indeed. So we did have this question earlier, Emma. I know you briefly touched on it about change fatigue. Is there anything that you wanted to add about that?
Yeah, so it's a really important, like a good point is, how do we overcome the change fatigue? And I don't think there's a magical way to overcome change fatigue. We are all going to experience it. But what I have seen done well is a cross-project collaboration. So in some companies, in some that I've worked with, they do have like a communications office. And so they look at what communications need to go out to which stakeholders, and they coordinate it. So making sure that there isn't going to be this kind of bombardment on specific groups and people, and then looking at how they can group some of them together, looking at different methods and ways to deliver the same information. And if there's enough around a group of projects, is it worth a town hall? And so everybody can come together and hear from project 1, 2, and 3 all at the same time, these important key points. So I don't think we'll ever get away from change fatigue, but I have seen some things done well to try and minimize it in some companies. And that was just one example that I've seen to try and minimize it.
I'm going to go through these questions. I think there's some really meaty questions, so I don't. It's not that I don't want to pass that question on, but there's another question here, which is one point that did not seem to be highlighted was which methods are mostly used successfully to assess the capabilities of the organization to absorb the change that is being planned, which is one of the many conditions of the success of change management. Santosh, any thoughts on that?
So I'm just reading it. Sorry.
I mean, anyone can jump in at this point.
Yeah.
That's a hard one. I have to say that the thinking back, so often it's a change that has to be made. There's an upgrade that's necessary. There's a new regulation that's required. And I think in this moment we have right now, it's a great question. It's a really important question. And when we talk about the economics of the business case and why change, this is a factor. This is probably an intangible that needs to be considered carefully in that business case, along with the desire for the C-suite to demonstrate change and adoption of this AI, which is intangible. This is also a question I think that's definitely worth consideration in that business case.
And I also want to add. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Santosh.
No, go ahead.
I think there's two important things that I've learned that go down well. Is transparency is key. If end stakeholders feel like something's being kept from them, then they're less likely to absorb the change. So transparency around the why, transparency around if there is a change that happens that does make us more efficient, what happens to the team that was doing that task. Being transparent from an early stage helps the adoption of that change. If they feel like something's being hidden, then there's barriers. And the why. So being transparent, and then what's in it for me, the benefits, the why are crucially important to help organizations, like the stakeholders, absorb that change that's going to happen. If they understand it and they got all of the facts, then you're normally better prepared for the change.
Exactly. So maybe I just thought of adding to it where the communication, right, is one of the very important thing of communication of the main vision, basically, of what it brings to the end user, right? The value, basically, why we are doing it, and not routinely just we are implementing something. How the end user can really benefit from it, moving away from what they are doing before, is something very important to inculcate as part of this change management.
Okay, thanks everyone. We've got a bit of a comment here that when it comes to change management, it's also very important to involve quality early on. Quality can help and provide tools to support the change. Companies are to face more and more changes moving forward. Nicole, do you agree with that statement?
I agree with that, and I think we do. We have to have quality involved, and I think quality shouldn't be. It is a separate department, but it should be part of the whole company. Everybody should wear a quality hat. Obviously, reporting, and there's the quality department, but I think that is very important, and that is something that we have learned, and as developing technology, like engineers, and they they might not have a background in pharmacovigilance and quality, so they will kind of come into that transition where they also need to be part of that documentation and keep everything up to date and fully documented. But essentially, yes, like we need quality. If we don't do it well at the very beginning, it will come back to us to bite us at any point in time within the process. We're definitely gonna get caught, basically, that we're not doing the right thing.
I have a very large question directed directly to Rich. So, Rich, you discussed the extent to which end users are prepared to adapt to change, noting that change often comes as a disruption. Have there been any past instances where customers have requested a reversal of changes because they realized they were not ready for them? How should we address such reluctance towards significant technological innovations in the pharmacovigilance sector? Should we always plan for a potential reversal in every change management project? I'm just going to remove this comment simply because everyone's faces are a bit hidden.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad it was specifically to me, Indy. Leah, thank you. I think short answer is no. I think I historically have not planned for a reversal, but I'll give you a couple of instances where we do for sure. So when you're doing your detailed deployment planning, in the last phases of it, you've got to be planning for rolling backwards in the event that the system's not up to snuff, you're not passing those final tests, you have difficulty with migration. That's a concrete example of where you would reverse. But as a rule, my advice is the following: the easiest time to impact the success of a project is right at the very beginning. It's the establishment of the charter. And so if you take the time to get the charter right, make sure the stakeholders understand the implications, the cost, where there are risks in the project, and you get full endorsement from that stakeholder group, that's the moment where you are most likely to influence the project and make it successful. And so rather than plan for a reversal, I would say take as much time as necessary to get the sufficient agreement, alignment, and commitment to move forward.
Yeah, I have a question, something to add here. Like, would you start a project thinking about the reversal? Like, I think that is counterintuitive to start a project already thinking that that's not going to work. I think all the work should happen beforehand in terms of change management and implementation and doing your research and getting the right people on board. You can do it at small places, as you said. So if you have to go back one step but go back the whole thing that hasn't worked, that seems very painful.
I mean, I can see where the question may have come from what I said about how this future is uncertain here, where it may be that you decide you're going to build AI inside your pharma walls, and that's the approach you're going to take. And as you're doing that, a year, 2 years from now, Biologit or somebody else has established and developed something that's more industry ready, and you may say, we're going to reverse course, we're going to go backwards, we're going to change. That is the kind of change I think that people need to be aware of now and be prepared for it, and then make the decision: are we going to go forward with this strategy, knowing that technology is advancing around us, or are we going to wait?
Maybe I can add here, right? I don't see it in a big transformative project, but there could be some technology programs which are explorative, right, where we are exploring something. So I think it's important that we have in the project plan a date or in the whole plan a point of no return. So till that particular time, you really explore, you see how it works, and you have a date already in place. By this time, the point of no return, if you really do not see a value in proceeding, you really go back with the fallback option. This way, you really don't spend too much millions on what you've already done. You really stick to the point of no return, spend minimal and get the maximum, right? If you do not like it, you go back. So maybe in exploratory projects, this can work, and we really have to build that in such projects. Otherwise, you spent everything, millions and millions, and at the end of the day, you don't implement it properly.
or breaking your project into phases so that you have a
Yes.
specific phase, which is to test, make sure that you're going to get benefit, to test that users would be, it meets the expectations of what you have today. It's better than what you have today.
Yes.
And then, so you have a phase to specifically do that analysis before you go into implementation.
Like a proof of concept. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly that.
So I've got two final questions, and then we shall wrap up for today. So firstly, critical to share experience, knowledges, best practices, and lessons learned. We learn so much more from failures. Nothing comes from hiding those experiences, and to only talk about successful experiences, particularly for effectiveness checks and hypercare immediate time after changes. I don't know if anyone disagrees with that statement.
No.
No,
Not at all.
we're all very much in agreement with that statement, so thank you. And the final question, which I find fascinating: what is your general experience with the adoption of flexible and iterative principles of agile and the benefits that come with it in the change management programs? Do you think that this is still a bit underutilized in the industry we operate in? I just want to put my 2 pence in here. I don't think agile works for everything, but anyway, I'll ask the panel. What's your opinion on this?
Maybe my 2 cents. Agile definitely work for some of the big programs, right? When you really do it in iterations, like sprints, maybe agile methodology, you have sprints, you have pockets, while you develop the whole project or whole product, basically, right? Definitely it helps, because as part of that particular sprint, you have something called as demo, right? You create it and you demo it, and that's the first experience when the SMEs or the end users get to have an informal, they can actually dry run or test, basically, to see if it's really working on. And before it goes too long in the project, you develop everything, and at the end of the day, you do the testing and you say, no, I have thousands of defects to fix. Rather, when you do it in iterations, you can actually fix it in the short term, and only at the end of the whole development, you run to get a minimal defects. That's my take on it. It definitely works in some of the big programs.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the more we use technology and are implementing technology, the more we're going to see that we're using agile and yeah.
I think it gives a good opportunity with the sprints, Santosh, that you were mentioning, to prepare the end materials for like our procedural documents, for our training programs and things like that. You can use that sprint to prepare, get ready. Then the next sprint that you come along, you're able to update and build on, and you uncover the little issues and the little quirks or the nuances and the little workaround pieces that you're going to have to do sooner rather than later, with having a go testing. Like, I do like that methodology, and I do think it brings benefit to change management, because you're uncovering things as you go and not big bang at the end and, oh my goodness, look what we've uncovered. It helps with the change management and the adoption.
Yeah, I was just going to agree with that, Emma. That I think it actually brings us full circle, Indy. So fantastic job bringing that question right at the end, because when I was just talking earlier about creative ways in which to compress the schedule and make sure you've got good change management, if you are using Agile, this is another way in which you can engage that workforce and get the feedback, take it, use it, build the messaging, send the messages you need to, in less time than you might if you don't get creative with your planning.
So I have been put in my place on Agile. So thank you very much, everyone. So I'd just like to say thank you to everyone watching, and thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Emma, Santosh, Rich, Nicole. It was a fantastic conversation. I'm now going to get rid of you off the screen, so thank you very much. I just wanted to tell everyone that, and to remind everyone that this is actually a 3-part webinar series in collaboration with Biologit. And we have 2 more coming this year, 2 more. And I look forward to seeing you then. So thank you very much and goodbye.